So, you know who we've been looking at this week now is Esther. But for those of you who've not been down in Kids Church with us, we thought we'd share some of the other people we've looked at already and our overall timeline to see just where Esther fits into God's big story. So, you could ask your young people if they've been with us what these different things are about. But we've started right at the beginning of the Bible in the book of Genesis with Adam and Eve. And we find all of these stories in the book of Genesis until we get to Moses. And then we skip along. Now, Esther's story happens after the Israelites have been exiled, but before they return and start rebuilding the temple and rebuilding the walls. So I wonder if you can have a think, guys, at home, where on this timeline you think our story of Esther might go. Do you think it's between Ruth and Elijah? Ruth was happening in the book of Ruth, but what time period was it? Can you remember? It's the book of, in the time of Judges. Then we go across to Elijah. We've got Jeremiah. This is who we were looking at last week. Any young people, tell your people at home if you can remember what type of prophet was Jeremiah. His book is a different colour from some of our other ones that we're going to get. He is a major prophet. So we had Jeremiah last week, and we remember that Jeremiah was known as the weeping prophet, and he was so sad. Why was he sad? It's going to give us a clue to where Esther's going to come. He was sad because he watched as the Jews were marched out of Jerusalem. They were exiled off to Babylon, and he was weeping and sad and lamenting, which is where our book Lamentations comes from, of the fact that God's people didn't listen and they didn't obey and they didn't do what God asked them to do, and so they were overthrown. But we all know, we've spent a lot of time with Nehemiah, that by the time we get here, he starts rebuilding the walls around Jerusalem, and the temple had already been rebuilt by who? Have a think. Wasn't Nehemiah who helped rebuild the temple? The person who led the people to rebuild the temple was Ezra. So it must be somewhere between Jeremiah and Nehemiah that we have our lovely Esther. So we're going to pop her on here. Here she is, beautiful Esther. And because we're trying to build a big picture of our Old Testament, we always want to know, if we wanted to read more about this, which book of the Bible would we find her story in? Don't know if you can have a little quick think. We've got Genesis, we've got Ruth, we've got 1 Kings, Jeremiah's in Jeremiah, Nehemiah's in Nehemiah. Well, this is one of the easier ones. We read about Esther's story in the book of Esther.